Good morning, White Guy. Well, this morning we're going to be starting on page 62, which is chapter 9. The rain was still coming down, and I'd either have to put on my wet tennis shoes to go back to the dorm or take off my socks and walk in my bare feet. I stood at the door, watching the rain make rivers on the windows of the side door to the school, feeling the cold of the cement stairs creeping through my socks. Barefoot it was. Then I heard a woman's voice, singing. It was rich, soulful voice, full of tenderness and heartache. Something in me hurt like a wounded joint that aches when it rains. The voice was coming from the basement. And as I walked down a couple of stairs, it dawned on me that it had been a while since I'd heard a woman's voice at all. Oh, there had been the ladies from the church who'd brought over casseroles after my mom died, but they usually spoke only in sympathetic whispers. The woman in the funeral home was old, and she smoked, so her voice was deeper than my father's. And there was Miss B, the librarian, but she spoke in a hushed librarian voice. No, I crept closer. This was the voice of a whole different kind of woman. She sang of wishing on the moon and begging of the stars. It was a song of dreams and longing. As I got closer to the custodian's workshop, I could hear a crackly, whirling sound and realized, with some disappointment, that the singing was from a record. I remembered what Early Auden had said. He listened to Louis Armstrong on Mondays, Frank Sinatra on Wednesdays, Glenn Miller on Fridays, and Mozart on Sundays, unless it was raining. If it was raining, it always was Billie Holiday. I had heard of Billie Holiday, the jazz and blues singer, but I'd never really listened to her sing. Her voice mixed with the music like molasses with warm butter. Excuse me, White Guy. I stood just outside the door listening, glad I was out of the rain, when I recognized a familiar smell. Wood. Wood shavings, cut wood, split wood. I breathed in deeply. It smelled like my dad's workshop and kind of like a soapbox car. Suddenly, I had a feeling I knew what Early was doing. I walked in, and there he was, leaning over the sweetie pie, laid out on a wooden frame. He had knocked out several sections of the warped boards and was working at unscrewing the seat rigging. I opened my mouth to tell him thanks, but no thanks. I really wasn't serious about building a better boat. My goodness gracious, I want to keep going, but I don't want to keep coughing. Her real name is Eleanor Fagan, Early said before I could speak. Whose real name? I said, irritated at how he just jumped into a conversation, making me feel 2 steps behind. Billie Holiday. I wondered if she changed it so people wouldn't confuse her with Eleanor Roosevelt. But I don't see how they could be confused because one's white and one's Negro. Do you know which one is white and which is Negro? Yes, Early, I know which is which. My irritation subsided a little. He was odd, but in a funny way. Plus, one is a singer, and one was the president's wife. Yep. It'd be pretty hard to confuse the two of them. The room smelled not only of wood, but also of other shop items, like kerosene, glue, and varnish. It was warm and homey. I picked up an oar and ran my finger along its rough paddle. The blade needs smoothing, Early said, handing me a square of sandpaper. Of course, it wouldn't be called paddle. That would be too common and make too much sense. I began sanding. There was something reassuring about the rough splinters giving way to a fresh smoothness underneath. Maybe her real name was Billie Holiday all along, but she had to earn it, just like pie. I didn't answer, not sure if I wanted to hear more about his imaginary story made up of numbers. Remember that part, Jackie? The part where Pie wants to go explore and his mother says to keep his eyes on the stars? Remember that? And she names the North Star after him, Polaris. Remember? Yeah, I remember, I said, still sanding. But he didn't earn his name yet. Right. So you want to hear what happens next? No. That mathematician Mr. Blaine knows of, Dr. Stanton. He's going to present his theory next month about pi ending. He says one number has already disappeared and eventually pi will die out. Stop that. You don't know what you're talking about. Early moved quickly to sit on his cot. He grabbed a jar of jelly beans off the shelf, poured them out into his bed, and started sorting them by color. I guess he did that to calm himself down. But at one point, he just quit sorting. His hands lay at his sides, and he stared off into space. His eyes blinked and fluttered a few times. I wouldn't have called it a full-blown fit, but I knew he was having one of those seizures the boys talked about. Just as I started to think that maybe I should go for help, he came out of it. I know where he is, Early said, as if nothing had happened. Where who is? I confessed. Pi. That professor says pi ends, but I know where he is. He's not talking about your character. It's the number that will end. But I could see that for Early, that they were one and the same. Sometimes he's hard to find for a while, but he always comes back. I always find him. Early kept sorting the jelly beans into neat groups of red, orange, yellow, green, and blue. Billie Holiday's voice trailed off, one song ending after another, and then one beginning. Early replaced the jelly beans in the jar and then flipped his chalkboard around, revealing rows of numbers. See, it's right here that he says that... I am so sorry, white guy. See, it's right here that he gets into his boat. These numbers, see how they look wavy like the ocean? 3, 2, 8, 5, 3, 4, 5, 7, 6, 8. No, they don't look wavy. They're just numbers. And you're making up a story to go along with them. I get it. It's pretty creative. Early balled his fists again. They're not just numbers. And I'm not making up a story. The story is the numbers. Look at them. The numbers have colors, blues of the ocean and sky, green grass, a bright yellow sun. The numbers have texture and landscape, mountains and waves and sand and storms, and words about Pi, about his journey. The numbers tell a story, and you don't deserve to hear it. Early moved the record player needle, cutting off Billie Holiday in the middle of a heartfelt song. He set it back down on the crackling empty space and sat on his cot with his back to me. I stared at his back for a minute. He was right. I probably didn't deserve to hear it, but I didn't want to go back to the dorm, and the lonely sound of the record crackling in the empty space made my heart ache, as if it had been rowing hard for a long time. So, these numbers, the wavy ones, what do they say? Early didn't turn around. His voice was quiet. That's where the sea gets rough. End of chapter 9 on page 66. All right, my dear boy, I'm going to get a bunch of these recordings over to your mom, who can get them on the iCloud or whatever magic thing they put it on, and then they can get it to you. So let's keep our fingers crossed and hope that everything works well. All right. I think later today I'm going to be working on a kind of scraggly Christmas tree, because this year, do you remember the garland that I used to put over the archway that went from the living room to the sunroom? Well, I can't do that this year because with this boot on my foot, I can't get up and down on a stepladder. So I thought, well, all right, let me try something new. So that's what I did. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work, so I'm not going to say much about it, because if it doesn't work at all, there won't be anything to see. But anyway, happy almost December days, White Guy. I love you very much. Okay, we'll read again soon.